everyone. What a topic we have today to discuss AI and its impact on humanity. So I'm an investor in artificial intelligence as long as probably since the late 90s, and I have been investing in everything from processors to infrastructure to autonomous driving and digital health, and you name it. And recently, of course, trustworthy AI is a big topic, so we're investing in this. But before we introduce, I'm very delighted to be with this panelists today, really amazing people coming from all over the world. Before we jump into this, let me just give a little bit of a snapshot what we are going to talk about. So when we prepared for this panel today, we thought, okay, it's a big topic. Philosophical implications of AI is a very, very big topic. So how can we frame it within 40 minutes? And we decided actually that we should focus on 3 aspects, and these aspects will be what we actually do with data, and how can we make sure that AI is not using of all of our resources that we need for humanity, actually, such as energy, water, and food. And the third one is, can we do something today in terms of regulation, or thinking, how do we frame thinking about artificial intelligence so that 20 years down the road, we actually have AI that is beneficial for the humanity and doesn't do harm. By the way, this doesn't do harm is the principle that most of venture capitalists today are trying to assume and implement, but actually there is no yet common ground to prioritize what is actually important in this discussion. So let's, with this, I would like to go to our panelists, and please introduce yourself and tell us about what have you done in artificial intelligence, and what is your view, very shortly, on good and bad in AI today. And then we will go deeper in the topic. So starting with you, Gary.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who's come here today. I'm Gary Shapiro. I head the Consumer Technology Association. It's a nonprofit trade association in the United States that represents 1,300 technology companies. We own and produce CES, which is a trade show in Las Vegas every January. About 140,000 people come from around the world, and we have about 3,000 or so exhibitors, and showing new technology. And I've been doing it for a long time. And you know, every time something comes along, we were joking backstage about 3D television was introduced there, which was not exactly a winning product. It was overhyped. But to me, AI has not been overhyped. To me, it's as fundamental as the internet itself. And of course, AI, as probably everyone in this audience already knows, has been around for a long time, a few decades. So when we talk about AI, I think we're talking about generative AI for the most part. And that's an opportunity whose promise is unlimited, in my view, to solve some of the fundamental problems that have plagued mankind. As an organization, we have a relationship with the United Nations and their fundamental human securities, which are access to health care, access to food, access to clean air and clean water, community involvement, and others. And they've added a new one at our request last October at the opening of the United Nations. We announced with the UN that there'll be a new fundamental human security, and that is access to technology. And a lot of this is built, in a sense, on AI, because with AI, we have the ability to tap all this amazing amount of data that we've accumulated over literally the history of mankind and put it in a way and even look back at it and build upon it to solve things like how we actually treat somebody for a malady, an illness. Because right now the way we do it is it's based on everyone is identical for the most part. And there's very little differentiation on the basis of your genetic code, your gender, your race, where you grew up, your family background. And we have the ability to make a difference with just that alone. But we also have the opportunity to dramatically reduce the number of deaths and accidents and injuries from vehicles, which are avoidable for the most part because of AI and a lot of other accomplishments. And we're all heading in this amazing direction, and of course it's magnified by quantum. But there's so many things we will talk about, and I don't want to take up any more time. So I'm going to turn it over and let you take it from there.
All right. I'm Vivian. The first model I ever built that did a real thing in the world, I was an undergrad. It was, for the nerds in the room, an old 3-layer backprop network. It found your pupils and your philtrum and could tell the difference between a real and a fake smile. By the way, we did it with $5 million from the CIA, and that my undergraduate lab spun off. If anyone here has an iPhone, Apple bought my undergraduate lab. So millions and millions of dollars in CIA funding. Now, if you ever use an emoji to become a cat on someone else's phone, that's the CIA gave you that. You can send them a thank you note. I've built a bunch of companies in AI, education, workforce, neurotechnologies, but actually it's the other work. In 2011, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. My wife and I, both being scientists, collected all sorts of data about him, brought it to his doctor, who was angry that we were wasting his time, and gave us a sheet of paper to write handwritten numbers on. And I said, fuck this. And I hacked all of his medical devices, broke several US federal laws, and as it turned out, developed the first ever AI for diabetes. I built a system to reunite orphan refugees with their extended family based on facial analysis. Mainly, I do philanthropic work. One of my new companies combines epigenetics and AI. We have the first ever biological test for postpartum depression. And we can score your risk before you ever experience symptoms, and you can begin treatment. It's the most common complication in pregnancy. And right now, they ask you 8 questions, and they only do it if you seem depressed. So you can make a real change with AI. For the rest of this conversation, I will not be so positive.
I'm Ben Goertzel, CEO of SingularityNet, and I've been thinking about the future of AI really since the early 1970s when I encountered AIs in science fiction. I guess I wrote my first AI code probably 1979 or something, which was not neural model yet then. It was rule-based and early forms of evolutionary learning algorithms. And it's been fascinating to be a part of the rapid growth of AI over the last few decades. So I introduced the term AGI in a book from Springer in 2005, like an edited volume, Artificial General Intelligence. And when I launched the AGI conference series in 2006, it sort of had the feeling of some mavericks huddled together, kind of scheming something that most of the AI field, let alone the technology world, didn't take seriously. And going forward, when we launched the Sophia robot in 2015, again, it was quite novel to have this generative AI behind a character, learning and interacting with people. When I co-founded SingularityNet in 2017, putting AI on the blockchain for decentralized participatory control of AI, again, this was an unusual thing to do. And what we're seeing is very rapid transition from things being way out there to being accepted and taken for granted. And that transition occurs faster and faster and faster, which is exactly what you would expect if, as Ray Kurzweil predicted, we're heading towards some sort of singularity where change is almost infinite in speed relative to human perception at any rate. So what I've been working on for my whole career is really how do you make machines that can think as well as people and even smarter than people, and how do you pull this off in a way that's to the benefit of humans and other sentient beings, including biological and digital. And it's amazing to be living in a time when so many people are finally interested in this sort of very important topic.
Amazing. Alea?
Yeah, so hi everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Alea Greek, and I'm the founder of Evolvi and Cosmos Foundation, which is a non-profit organization for AI, and I prefer the term artificial consciousness. Through all my career and through all my life, I've been focused on 2 topics. It's space exploration and human consciousness. And that's what I combine in my current activities in AI and exploring how understanding of human consciousness and human minds can bring us new generation of artificial consciousness, or AGI, as Ben told, and how it can benefit our humanity and help to explore space. I previously built 2 companies in space technologies. We created 3D printing for outer space, a new type of the engine for small nanosatellites and CubeSats. But what I find out that it's really hard to create, I would say, technologies for space and to bring more people to space if you don't have a next level and next generation of artificial technologies, and specifically robotics for manufacturing, construction, and space. And my belief is that artificial intelligence can bring a huge benefit to humanity, and I know that it's a topic for the next 25 minutes of our discussion, but it should be very, I would say, aligned with human beings and with a focus on human evolution. So we shouldn't rely only on robots and take care of our life. So it's all about our also personal growth and personal development, and that's the core of my also activities and research. So I'll be happy to share my thoughts further in this discussion.
Amazing. Now, thank you so much for these introductions. So let's jump into it. So how comes we are today in the very early days of adoption of artificial intelligence? Probably less than 10% of enterprises are using it, yet we are already so much worried about bias, about privacy, about safety, and all these things. And I'm just really worried what will happen when the adoption reaches 50% or more. So let's jump into this discussion. And please, when you give your views, please give also examples. Like, what did you see specifically in terms of bias, and what do you think can be solved? So let's start with Vivian, because you had these amazing examples on HR specifically, and maybe you can elaborate on their bias, but also on the ownership. Like, how do you think about the ownership of data?
Wow, how do we make this quick? I'm going to first echo what you're saying. The goal in my work is to make better people. I just happen to believe that machines can be a genuine part of that. Technology can be a part of that. So let me give a very simple example to start with. About 15 years ago, I tweeted something out. I generally loathe social media with a passion that dims the sun, but every now and then I say something stupid and it needs to be shared. In this case, I said in about 20 or 30 years, there will be a meaningful increase in the rate of early onset dementia. And it will be causally related to the use of Google Maps. Navigating through space is one of the things that we know is prophylactic against cognitive decline. And we don't have to do it anymore. That sense where I don't remember how I got here to work, what we call automaticity, now it's in a little screen in front of you. And in the years since, sure enough, we see early evidence that suggests that this is actually true. So here's my measure of a technology. Not only am I better when I'm using it, but am I better than when I started when I turn it off again? And if it doesn't pass both of those tests, I'm not interested. I do use Google Maps. I tell it, tell me where to go, as it did to get here today, and then I try and beat it there by taking a different route, by thinking hard about what it is I'm doing. As psychologists would call it, I try to go deep. Because we build technology today with the idea that it's to keep us shallow. All of that busy work thinking, let's not do that anymore. Now, I bet the majority of people at a conference like that probably net benefit from technology. But writ large across the world, this is something I genuinely concerned about. And I might as well just be blunt about it. We were chatting earlier. Years ago, I got recruited to be, I got the best job recruiting message ever. I get lots of terrible ones. This one knew me. They said, Dr. Ming, in 7 years, our company will have 1 million employees. They're like 1.8 now. Your job will be to make their life better. So I flew up to Seattle, and I met with Jeff and everybody else at Amazon. I didn't think I would take the job. It turns out Jeff has a very different idea of a better life than I do. But one of the things they were working on was a machine learning system. This is not Gen AI, but a deep neural network that would speed up their hiring process by modeling who is likely to be successful inside Amazon and further reduce bias. But the thing is, and I bet many of you read about the result, at the time I told them it wouldn't work. And they built it anyways. Genuinely well-intentioned people, brilliant, built this thing, and it just absolutely wouldn't hire women. Because the single largest correlation in their hiring history is women don't get a promotion in their first year at Amazon. Nothing else was statistically meaningfully significant. So they did everything they were supposed to in the common discussions of ethical AI. They took out all the gender markers. They took out the women's college names. They scrubbed everything they could. Then they reweighted the data to have simulated equal numbers of men and women. And their model did something amazing, something no human could do. It figured out who was a woman and wouldn't hire them. No one wanted this to happen. They're not bad people. But this is what happened. They were good enough that they never put this into production. But if you want to make ethical AI, it isn't about the AI. Are you owning the whole problem that you're working on? Are you truly owning everything? Not optimizing the meta parameters, not fine-tuning your prompts. Does it matter to you that your system is truly hiring the best employees, no matter what? Because if you're not following it to that end, you'll end up where an amazing company ended up, with a bunch of brilliant employees, with a tool that they spent 3 years building that did exactly the wrong thing and they could never fix. Or worse, you would have put it into production. So this is the case.
It's amazing, the amazing example, very visual. And Gary, you're seeing a lot of companies, technology companies, that are trying to develop, best AI solutions. How do you see this? Do you have these discussions with companies? Did you see more how do you see this topic at all?
I see rapid change at companies using AI as a productivity device and taking generally what we would call white-collar workers and redeploying them to do rather shifting from more laborious tasks to more thinking tasks, if you will. So someone else is doing the analyses, the reports, the spreadsheets, at least in the first draft. And I see that as a productivity tool which is beneficial to the world in many ways. One of them is, a lot of the world's focused on inflation, and inflation actually is affected, everyone thinks, just by interest rates, but it's actually affected by productivity, and productivity actually is more output per person that's working. And that's a benefit to society. It takes away a lot of mundane tasks. It will mean, like a lot of new technologies, a redeployment of human capital. And when you're doing that, change is difficult for people. It's uncomfortable, but that's the history of innovation and technology. And we've always, as a humanity, gone forward and said that. Having said that, though, you have to have some ethical parameters around that in terms of how you do it. I mean, there are things, including bias, and bias is definitely there. I think it's good that we're having a discussion about it, and I've testified before Congress on this as long as 5 years ago, talking about things like how you parole prisoners and things like that. Is if there's bias, or even potentially given the consequences of a parole decision, you have to get human beings involved early on. You have to focus on bias. But if you're looking at whether one car is going to hit another car and have a collision, bias isn't the issue. Saving lives is the issue. And if you take a balanced approach of human safety versus potential harm in what you're doing, I think some of the answers become clear and they become more situation specific. The other big issue which is out there that in a sense is I look at the world in 3 parts. I look at China and its allies, where there's a huge amount, especially China, huge amount of data, 1.4 billion people, one area, one department that does all the healthcare records, and they have everything on everybody. They socially rank everyone. It determines whether you can travel, what hotel you stay at, where you rank on a dating website, and whether you jaywalk, who your friend. It's based on all sorts of stuff that's put in there, and I don't know what their algorithm is, but it's pretty comprehensive. And privacy does not matter. And then there's Europe. Everything's about privacy. Europe was first with GDPR. They focused on AI. A lot of it's privacy and bias. And then my sandbox is the United States, where we focus on policy. And my goal is to get the US to balance innovation and privacy like Goldilocks and the 3 bears, so the porridge is just right. Because innovation is super important. There's a lot at stake here. And also, the other part of it that's important is to make it so that AI can't just be a game for big companies. We have to allow startups and anyone to really, with a good idea, to pursue it, but you also have to have the guardrails.
It's a very important point. I will come to Ben in a second to tell us what we should do for the future. But first with Ale, you're running, so in NGO environment, you should be thinking a lot exactly about these things. First of all, where the data is coming from, the quality of data, but also the ethical aspect of data, but also who owns the data. Like, if it's only big companies that are having access to data, you know, what is the aspect, societal aspect of this? Can you talk a little bit about how do you view the space of data?
Yeah, sure. So what is crucial right now in terms of like data and all these aspects of, I would say, approach to it. That's why I started many years ago this new approach to architecture, because what's going on right now in Gen AI area, there is like tons of amounts of data which you need to proceed to aggregate. You need to have like lots of like capacity in order to store it and so on, and it's enormously expensive, and it's not, I mean, beneficial in terms of like both like ecological aspects, because it's like runs lots of energy and so on. So my approach and what I believe that we need to create in new more efficient architectures, and that's what Vivian mentioned and Ben in their works, and I believe that's an approach where we should focus more, because human mind is brilliant. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and they're currently at the stage when they're learning through the environment. And it's so amazing. They don't need millions of cat pictures to understand that this is a cat. They just start to learn from like touching a cat and understanding. And I've been focused for like last 7 years on studying both psychological, emotional aspects of human mind and consciousness in general. Because I believe that through the way of understanding, for example, human emotions, and we created 2 large data sets together with Stanford University and UCL in London, regarding like how through emotions we make smart decisions, and how it can be approached and brought to AI architectures to bring much more, I would say, efficient architectures overall. So you don't need to proceed lots of data to make the right decision, because we as humans, we make the majority of decisions. So for example, like I should eat banana or apple based on our emotions, not on like calculating and generating lots of data. And this is the first aspect about the data, because we should like consider a new way of approaching it. And second way, it's quantum computing, and that's why we are currently focused on building a physical lab. So we started a long time ago with quantum software, and now going to hardware side, because I believe that through quantum algorithms we can also provide much more efficiency to calculations, because that's the way the quantum works. You again, like you did it in a much smarter and efficient way. But I would also like to comment on what Vivian said. The most important part here is still a human being. We shouldn't rely like everything on data, on managing this data and so on. We'll figure out this. Like we're very smart here, but we should continue to develop our aspects as a human of a creativity and of like generating our personal evolution, because only through this, I believe, we can make a next leap to data, space exploration, whatever, smarter AI architectures and so on, because we shouldn't like lose our way to be creative and to be like we shouldn't become robots, basically.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good. And so
can I build a quantum computational simulation of myself to project all possible futures in which I did and didn't eat that banana and pick the one true me that I want to be?
This would be amazing. Yeah. But this is talking about general intelligence, Ben. So just maybe having heard this all, how would you build it basically? And how do you see the future? How shall we approach this data point? We want a general intelligence.
Well, yeah, I think there's a number of different aspects to the relation between data, human society, ethics, and AI. So certainly, I mean, the ethical handling of data is important, whether you're talking about AI or any other sort of technology. And our technology ecosystem, you know, it uses people's data without consent or with sort of, you know, sketchily obtained consent and so forth. And all this is important to solve. And I mean, when you train an AI on people's data, people should know it, people should be compensated for it, they should be able to opt out. all that is important, and I'm glad people are working on that. I'm sad more rapid progress isn't being made on that. If we look at this from a broader view, though, looking at the future of AI, I think the insane need for data that we see on the part of many current AI algorithms, such as large language models and convolutional neural nets, I think, as she was alluding, this is partly a result of the relatively primitive nature of these algorithms. And in many ways, these AIs are seeing a lot more data than any one of us has seen or any human child sees. Yet we're able to make great insights and leaps of generalization without having seen billions of examples of each physical object that we interact with. So I think that as we progress further toward general intelligence, there won't be such a need to feed multiple repetitions of very similar data items into each AI system. So some of the issues that we're seeing are going to be less critical. So I think the appetite for data is an artifact of crude AI algorithms. And the issue of bias in AI models has a somewhat similar aspect. I mean, it's certainly important, and AI models that are sexist, racist, ageist, otherwise biased can wreak real harm in
we are,
in
and
the
they're
world.
trained on us.
Yeah, and I think there are tractable ways to control this problem if people care enough, because as she's saying, I mean, it has to do with what data are you feeding into it, what objectives are you training models for, how are you using them in the overall situation. On the other hand, I think that ultimately, in practice, a better solution is to make AIs that can reflect on what they're doing and actually understand, what their purpose is and have their own internal moral compass. I mean, right now, that's simply not the case. We're training an AI model as a tool and either doing so thoughtfully or thoughtlessly, but the AI is not itself reflecting on, like, am I doing harm when I'm deployed in the world? Like, what's the actual objective? What are the objectives of different parties involved? Why am I here? Why am I being created? What am I doing, right? So, again, as you move toward general intelligence, you will then have AI systems that are self-reflective, can self-improve, and that are comparing their actions with their aspirations. And I mean, I think ultimately that's where we're moving toward and will be a better solution. But while AGI technology is being worked out, certainly we want to do shorter-term things to optimize the ethics of current technologies as they're being deployed.
Let's keep this thought, because it's a very important thought, but let's keep this thought also when we discuss regulation. But now you also touch on systems using less data. Let's talk about this data and energy resource aspect, just very briefly, right? So what we know now that just to generate one image, it takes as much energy as charging your phone. We also know that training a model will emit as much CO2 as 5 cars in their lifetime. It's kind of not sustainable. And as models grow, as data amount is growing, it's just we know that this energy is taken from other important things for us as humans, and this energy is taken from producing food, and it's this water to generate energy is taken also out of the system, and we know there is a huge problem. So anyone wants to comment on this aspect of the ethical problem?
I think if we really succeed in making progress toward AGI, then you have a problem which is solving itself, because an AGI will figure out how to use power more efficiently. It will invent new forms of power generation. It'll make solar and nuclear power work better, right? So, I mean, I don't think there's not necessarily an in principle problem there, but I would.
So AGI is like I dream of Genie. You just rub it and it'll solve our problem. I agree with you, but it's timing in a sense.
That's like, is electrical power a genie? No, it's not a genie, but it certainly solves a lot of problems that existed before we had AC power, right?
No, but we have artificial intelligence. We have quantum, which uses a lot of energy. We have electric cars, which use a lot of energy. We're in denial, to be honest, as a society, that we don't have the electricity right now, and we could build all the solar and water we want in the world. It's not going to be enough. So we have to make some fundamental
Then we get to
decisions.
the plan of putting nuclear power plants on pontoons floating all out in the ocean.
I think
right?
that, what France has proven it. It's nuclear power is on aircraft carriers and survives with humans. I think the world is slowly shifting to realization. If it's not nuclear power, maybe it's hydrogen power, maybe it's something else. But we got to do something different.
Yeah, well, I would say that the same thing I mentioned, where more advanced AI models can be more flexible in their use of data. I mean, certainly the same is true of electrical power. I mean, if you're making AI, which is focused on abstraction and generalization, rather than just brute force crunching of data, you can probably achieve much more intelligence
Exactly.
with much less power.
Right?
I mean, the brain achieves a fair amount of intelligence, at least in some ways, with a quite modest power consumption.
Yeah, exactly. And again, through quantum algorithm, you can create for example, new molecules, or you can create new type of technologies, even for engines, or using resources which can be much more efficient, because it can provide this, I would say, more efficient way to analyze all these amounts of possible turnarounds and the ways that we can create a breakthrough. That's the benefit, and that's how it can be.
So we all know what to do, but coming to you, you said, well, we can have these brilliant ideas, but then they're not implemented. So what's your view on this?
My view, and I think it's genuinely realistic, whether it is improvements, algorithmic or chip improvements that can reduce energy costs, thinking that in some ways AI will solve itself. Right now, ask yourself, of all the times someone's running some sort of a generative model, how often is it diagnosing an early case of cancer and saving someone's life? And how often is it creating a fake image of Joe Biden riding a rainbow cat into battle? I don't know what, but some bullshit thing that appears on X and they use the same amount of energy. Mm-hmm. We could be a lot more thoughtful about how we're using this stuff right now. Even today, there is value, and then there is waste. And we're treating them all essentially equally. And that's absurd. And if I may be so self-indulgent here as to say, as you were talking about data, my company has a test that can save people's lives with postpartum depression. A new mom shouldn't have to choose between a life-saving test and her privacy. So we chose, although our investors do not love it, we started a nonprofit. By contract, the nonprofit owns all of the data, and its sole fiduciary responsibility is to those moms. It owes our company nothing. But the point of the data is to make the diagnosis. It forces us to have the best product we can possibly have on the market, because that's our value add. We are not allowed to build a data moat around our company and say no one else can do what they do because we have all the data. In fact, I would argue that what I am describing, what is called a data trust, is one of many ways in which data could be shared more generally, and I believe it is positive for economic growth if we stop fighting over who owns data and just acknowledge, I own my data. And then where do we go from there? And actually make progress? I want to see big companies and small companies competing fairly over great products, not over who has the right private data set that no one else can touch.
I think Gary just said.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing you said you're doing is focusing on menopause. And I want to use that as an example because it's a very positive use. I mean, it's a huge life-changing situation. But men don't go through it. So one of the proposals we were dealing with...
Note that all of our lead investors are women. Is that a shock to you? But yeah.
Well...
So I think, I know, and I think it's great, but one of the things we have to be careful, just to get back to bias for a second, is men and women are different. Races are different. People are different by age. And we don't want to throw the baby away with the bathwater, if you will, because there are proposals which say you may not use AI and you may not do research that distinguishes on the basis of age or sex or race. And it sounds very unpolitically correct to say, but that's absurd, because if you want to solve people's healthcare problems, you have to dissect people in a number of different ways to get to what really works for them. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. It's
done.
Great. But I think, so just because we are kind of running out of time here, but I want to finalize this panel, and I think you can summarize this now. So there were so many points, but let's finalize this panel by saying, each of you saying one thing you want to do differently today, starting from today, and advising everyone to do differently, to create a better, safer, more ethical AI for the future, and the message you would send to regulators based on this. Just one thing, think about, like maybe starting with Ali and then going this way.
Yeah, so my message, and it's a personal message for my company, for my team, and for the audience overall, is to focus not on like AI technologies and so on, but focus on yourselves, focus on us as the humans. And I'll explain why, like, shortly. So because the way we need to think and to act, it really depends how these models will be created and further. Because we currently, these AI models are basically our babies, what we bring inside them, what we train them. So do we ask them to create some bullshit pictures, as Vivian mentioned, or do we ask them to create, for example, better technologies for save lives, or to travel to, I don't know, to distant planets, whatever. It's our own choice what we bring right now to these models. And we could create some kind of constitution, which will be fundamentals for next generations of AI. And the other things will be figured out, so it will be quantum, like AGI or whatever.
So constitution to the regulation. So Ben, very short.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we move forward, I think we're likely to get AIs that are as smart as people within, let's say, the next 5 years. Ray Kurzweil predicted 2029. And there's more than one thing that's important. How the AI is built is important. You want an AI architecture that is actually capable of self-reflection and moral judgment, which current LLMs aren't. I mean, our OpenCog architecture is. Other things are too, but you want something that is. I mean, who owns and controls the AI is also important. It should be a wide participatory group rather than a small elite, and the more elevated the consciousness of those who are guiding it, as she's saying, the better. And what the AI is deployed to do makes a difference also. Is it primarily helping people, or is it primarily serving the interest of one party trying to screw over other parties? And if all these things are lined up well, then no, it's not going to be perfect, but we can see the advent of human-level AI and beyond be quite amazing for humans and other sentient beings.
I will agree computationally. For the nerds in the room, I think we need to understand causality, and not the simulation of reasoning, but real reasoning. But boy, is that a challenging problem. But it's one that has to get solved. If you're deciding who gets loans, who gets jobs, who gets diagnosed, it can't be correlations. It has to be cause. But the flip side is, it's not about technology. We need better people. Dis and misinformation works online not because AIs can generate perfectly fake images, but because we want to be misled. Because we don't want to challenge ourselves. And we need a generation that wants to know what's really going on in their life and how to push forward and do something better. So if anyone here wants an idea of where they should start on something bigger, think, how do we make every kid that's born today a better person? How do we make them the person that wants to continue to self-optimize the way your AIs are meant to?
Amazing. And I want to give you enough time, but please just don't worry. Tell us the last, but the most important.
Ignore the red, angry face on the screen.
Thank you. It's great to be here with such smart people who have actually done things with AI. I personally am just an observer and participant in trying to push it in the direction I'd like to see it go, which is the fact that all of us here, in a sense, are very fortunate people. We attend a great conference, but there's billions of people in the world, and the big picture goal that I see is solving their most fundamental problems of just healthcare and food and clean water and access to information and mobility. So if we keep that in mind, and we also keep in mind the fact that this should be something where new entrants have a right to also show what they can do and put some guardrails around so the bad stuff doesn't happen, I think we could focus on the big goals and get there, and some of the things you've been talking about.
Amazing. I think this is a great final thought. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for seeing the panel.